It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears.
Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And for this, our 75th episode, we are going back to cartoons. And we have watched the Adventure Time miniseries Stakes, which aired as part of its 7th season many years ago. Would you like to do the plot or shall I?
I will try.
Okay.
So, Marceline, the vampire queen, has gotten tired of being a vampire. And so she has asked her best frenemy, inventor Princess Bubblegum, who's temporarily not a princess for some reason, to remove her vampirism. And unfortunately, doing so creates the vampires that she originally killed have now come back to life, and she must hunt them down again with her friends and a lot of shouting.
Yep, that just about sums it up. Are there wizards here?
Well, there's vampires, and the vampires might as well be wizards.
Yes.
And one of them has like a wizardy hat, so.
Yep. And there's the Ice King, who is
definitely and there's the Ice King, who's absolutely a wizard. So yes, there's absolutely wizards.
Mm-hmm. And lesbians. Are there lesbians?
Well, I'm pretty sure Marceline is bi, because I've only seen like 10 other episodes of the show, but one of them she had a terrible boyfriend. But I'd be willing to believe that Princess Bubblegum is a lesbian.
Yes. As far as I'm aware, there's no evidence to the contrary. That's debatable, but that in my having said that reveals that I've watched a lot of Adventure Time.
However, it is clear that the emotional quasi-romantic relationship between these two women is definitely the core of this story, and I've been told, though I have not seen the episode, that they kiss by the end of this series. So
they do kiss by the end of the series, but honestly, in my opinion, the I'll be the one to bury you when you die thing is probably more romantic than the actual kiss.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. And so wizards and lesbians definitely in conflict here. This is actually, on the rewatch, I was surprised by how much of a sort of mainline Wiz-Les piece of fiction this is.
This actually engages with a lot of the themes that we have identified in the microgenre.
It certainly does, which is exciting.
Yeah.
And let's see here. This came out in 2015. So it's right around the sort of the beginning time that we've identified for the sort of the takeoff of the microgenre. So why should you watch this?
Well, the episodes are very short.
They are.
So even if you don't have a lot of time or patience to sit down and watch things, it's really not much of a time investment, and they're really quite entertaining.
It's about the length of a short movie, 12 minutes times 8 episodes. So yeah, not a huge amount of time investment, and you're free to sort of depart at any point also. So there is that. Anything else?
I thought it was really entertaining. I liked it better than much of the other Adventure Time stuff that I've seen. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the Adventure Time episodes that focus on Marceline and or Princess Bubblegum tend to be the ones that I find most interesting. But, I found it above average in terms of entertainment value for Adventure Time.
Indeed. And by my lights, and I'm somebody who really likes Adventure Time, it's among the best things they ever did. So basically, if you like well-directed, interestingly written cartoons about girls having problems, this is a pretty good one. Why shouldn't you watch it?
It's very shouty. There's definitely some times where it's clear that they wanted to put a joke or some plot or something in there, or that they just had to fill some space. And so instead of putting any content in there, they just have everybody run around shouting for a minute.
Yeah, that's sort of what Finn and Jake's job in this is to run around and fall over a lot, which I think maybe gets into some of what is going on with masculinity.
Yes, and that is the thing that that's why I never really got into Adventure Time, is that it was just a lot of running around and shouting.
I mean, you and I are both anime fans, so I would say that we've certainly built up a certain amount of tolerance to running around and shouting over the years. But
Part of the problem is that Adventure Time came on the scene around when I was like getting sick of watching anime because I was tired of just watching people run around and shout.
whereas I've never really lost my opinion that shouting is inherently funny. So
there you go. Also, I'm not sure how much sense this makes if you haven't seen any Adventure Time. I was watching it with Leora, and some of it you could get from context, and some of it we had to rely on my extremely patchy memory of what happened. So I'd be like, oh yeah, that's right, Bubblegum is an inventor. I don't know why she doesn't have a castle. Normally she has a castle. Oh, that's why she doesn't have a castle.
yeah, some of those questions are answered within the course of the series, but it does take place within the larger Adventure Time continuity, and yeah, it is unusual in that her castle's been taken over by a sentient blob of earwax. So
it's also useful to know things like Jake can change size and shapeshift, because it's not like you absolutely need to know that, but it's useful to know that this is part of the background and not, something that is unusual, especially because shapeshifting as a theme comes up otherwise.
that is true, yeah. And it tells you, it gives you the cues you need for the emotional relationships between the characters for the most part. But yeah, it does expect you to be at least sort of baseline familiar with the tone of the show, or the the rules of this world. I would say that for me, it's I mean, it's sort of why not to watch it would fall under content warnings probably. So we could move on to there unless there's anything else to bring up.
No, I think if you like Adventure Time and somehow haven't seen this, then you should watch it. And if you're kind of meh on Adventure Time, but this is one of the better ones to watch. And if you hate Adventure Time, then don't bother, because this is still very Adventure Timey.
Yes, it definitely has many of the things that those friends of mine who couldn't stand Adventure Time couldn't stand.
I would also say, honestly, though, if you're the sort of person who was never particularly interested in Adventure Time, but was really into either Steven Universe or She-Ra, that this is probably worth checking out, because, it has the lesbian content and the Sailor Moon references and things like that.
Yes. And while Rebecca Sugar was no longer working on the show at this point, it's very much dealing with the stuff that she left them.
Yes.
Yeah, no. It's also like I will get into this more after the spoiler zone, but it's definitely Dude's perspective on the stuff that she left him. But there it is. As for content warnings, it gets as close to depicting a rape as like a Cartoon Network show can, which made it's textually about trauma, and particularly about sexual trauma. And it's not that it's not like super intense, but it's certainly unexpected in the context of Adventure Time.
Yeah.
Other than that, vampires being scary, it says so on the cover.
There's some body horror stuff.
Yep, definitely that.
Mob violence.
Yes. Although, somewhat ineffectual mob violence, but I guess they do manage to get her in that one part. Yeah. So having said that, shall we just go on and talk about it?
Yeah, let's.
Let's go in the garden. You'll find something waiting right there where you left it, lying upside down. It is all the content from this piece of fiction, hidden from your notice till you're ready to enter the spoiler zone.
All right. So I wrote a big Tumblr post about this after it came out like 8 years ago, and it was interesting rereading it and seeing like which of my takes had stayed the same and which of them had changed. And I think a lot of what had changed has sort of come from, viewing this in a Wizards versus Lesbians context rather than anything else. Is there anything that you want to start with so that it's not just me sort of info dumping about Adventure Time?
Well, I think let's try to avoid that regardless. But okay, so let's start with, actually, so here's the thing that I thought was most interesting, is that much of the time when you have a I'm a monster who needs to be cured theme, it's a metaphor for, usually it's a metaphor for homophobia. Especially media produced by people who were alive in the 80s and 90s.
Sure. Okay.
With the idea of there being a cure for being gay. And so most of the time, the thing is, no, you don't need a cure for this. You just need to learn to love yourself. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really interesting. That was the one thing that, surprised me fairly early on, was that this was not presented. And of course, obviously, this is going to have to end with a return to the status quo of her regaining her vampireness, because I know she's a vampire at the end of the show. Mm-hmm. Because when everybody's, being very happy that they finally kiss, they're not like Marceline, the former vampire queen. So I expected that, this would be Marceline needs to come to terms with herself. And that is why, she's going to become a vampire again. And I really liked that they took it in a different direction. That, no, actually being a vampire sucks. Yes. And blah, blah, blah. But, and it's terrible. And she was right to want a cure. And that, her re-becoming a vampire is like a real act of self-sacrifice, to, save other people. And so, it's not something that she has to learn to love about herself. And I really liked that. It works better as a metaphor for trauma and also as a metaphor for disability.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like, this is taking a slightly more sort of nuanced view of therapy, in that sense, in that, it's not sort of like, it would be nice if there was like a conversion therapy machine that you could go in and have all your bad stuff sucked out.
Well, usually given that conversion therapy refers to making people straight, no, it would not be nice at all, actually.
No, I mean, a therapy machine. I'm
okay.
I'm trying to work on two different things at once, because the show is we're beyond the cultural moment in the show when we're thinking about like conversion therapy and
right.
becoming...
Even though it's still absolutely a thing that exists and absolutely a thing that vulnerable people, particularly teenagers, get forced into.
Absolutely. Like we just talked about We Know the Devil,
right,
which is very spiritually akin to this in some ways. But yeah, no, that's not where the show is. At least the show is more interested in being like, okay, so Marceline has had an incredibly fucked up life, and she's been systematically let down and hurt by all of the men in her life.
All the adults in her life, really.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't her mom's fault that her mom died.
No, but
that,
I mean, no, and you can argue that it wasn't entirely Simon's fault that he went insane. But
yeah, no.
I mean,
she's
like
been let down in different ways and to varying degrees by all of the adults
right.
in her life. It's like, okay, this left her, who she is. She finally decides that she wants to, try to do something about it. And that's sort of the period of entering therapy, right? Mm-hmm. Starting to struggle with all of the black goo inside of her. And the idea that it just gets sucked into a bucket, which is left on the floor, is
yes.
incredibly funny.
Yes.
And the show also knows that it's funny because it then, recapitulates the joke
mm-hmm.
more so at the last part of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And, all of this, and all of the ooze inside her goes out into the world. And the immediate, supposition, in fact, is that this is causing her to act out and to hurt people, which is probably, I would say, metaphorically, at least, what is actually happening, because all of this damage is being caused by the vampire creatures that are a part of her.
Yeah, and it's sort of, initially you think that it's quite literally her doing it, and then when it isn't, it is, all of her trauma has been pulled out of her and now just going around attacking people.
Yeah, which is just, it's another step on that chain of metaphors, I think. And in the end, it's sort of about, accepting that what getting better looks like, which is not, this cure-all, but rather, we go through the one step and we, we recapitulate the cycle and we learn something and we grow up a little bit from having addressed it. And that keeps happening.
Yes, though it doesn't, the show does not come down on the "and this keeps happening" part.
I think it does.
I mean, she grows a little bit, and there's no idea that they're ever going to try anything like this again.
It's not going to, it's not going to say that she's going to be like cured as a result of this either. It's not even necessarily true but she might be a little bit happier and she might be a little bit, in a better place mentally.
No, I think she is, but I think the problem is that she's going to a slightly better point of stasis, but it's not part of a process. And that's fine. But, I think that I'm not sure that the therapy metaphor entirely works. Because, again, this is sort of a one and done, and then nobody seems particularly inclined to try it again.
And can you blame them? Sometimes going back to therapy really is kind of like baiting the apocalypse for your friends and loved ones.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, of course, in part because we're working within the strictures of a TV show where you have to return everything to the status quo. Although I think it's also commenting on that. One of my favorite things that happens in here is the recontextualization of the lullaby, which is in fact written and voiced by Rebecca Sugar as Marceline's mother, which is another way that her presence hangs over this arc. In that, at beginning, it seems like a very comforting message, and you hear that melody at the end of every episode because they've replaced the ending credit music with an instrumental version of it. Mm-hmm. But by the end, it's like, oh no, actually, everything stays, and that's including your trauma, and that's including your pain, and that's including your hurt. It's never going to leave you completely. All you can do is change your perspective on it, and it's like, I mean, this is a breakthrough. I think it textually in the show, it changes Marceline and Bubblegum's relationship to the point where they can have their kissy moment later on.
Well, that's good.
That's as much to do with the evolving view of Cartoon Network about that kind of thing.
Right. Else. But that's in
universe and out of universe explanations. That's fine.
Right. The author may or may not be dead, but the network certainly still exerts some control. Yeah, and I mean, it's part of this is though. I have mixed feelings about reading too much of this as metaphorical, because I mean, it works very well metaphorically reading, but sometimes it's also useful to step back and go, okay, but this is still a story about somebody who is, this is a story that takes a very positive view of somebody who has committed herself to genocide. Like specifically, the reason that she becomes a vampire is so that there will still be one vampire in the world, and, vampires as a species cannot be completely wiped out. Mm-hmm. Which I thought again that was an interesting choice for the show to make it very clear that no, she is in fact committing genocide, and that maybe there is something that is lost there, even if the thing that she, the people that she is killing are, extremely predatory.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because it's like, I'm like loath to view the vampires as a racial metaphor, because they seem to be portrayed more as just like particularly monstrous or cursed individuals, or in fact symbols.
Right, but the Vampire King very specifically says, do not do this, do not kill me. Why are you're going to kill the very last one of me. Okay, well, if you're going to kill me, then I'm going to ensure that my people are not completely wiped out.
Well, yes, but the Vampire King is also incredibly full of shit. Like,
he is,
I
but
wouldn't
he's
trust
also
a single thing that he says.
Well, except that he's correct. She is like killing every single vampire.
Mm-hmm.
She is quite canonically killing every single vampire. And
This is true.
I do have some.
And this is
mixed...
canonically the source of a lot of how fucked up she is.
Right, and
the fact that she chose to embark upon this in the first
I have
place.
to say that I have somewhat mixed feelings about the bloodsuckers. We need to wipe them all out, as a narrative.
Well, it's sort of not where it comes down on. I think that like the most sort of bigoted character here against vampires is Jake, and he's not shown in a particularly good light.
He's shown as less bigoted and more terrified. I mean, the other people who also want to wipe out Marceline are also shown as, not in a good light.
Yeah.
So
no, there's a lot of, the show is like not like, yes, Marceline is doing the right thing here.
Right, and I thought that was an interesting choice because, for one thing, by making it explicit that she is in fact wiping out an entire, group of people, and bringing up, the specter of mob violence, it makes her a much more complicated character, and it makes the narrative much more complicated.
Okay, yeah, no, I will absolutely agree with that. So let's talk about the Vampire King since we brought him up.
Yes.
All of the other vampires are named after tarot cards.
Yes.
And they, to a greater or lesser extent, embody the sort of metaphorical weight of those cards. He has physical attributes that might remind people of the World card, because he is sort of this half lion, half bird creature. He doesn't look like what you would think of as a vampire king.
That's true. That's not really what I think of when I think of the World either. So
the tarot card.
No, I know. But
yeah,
I mean,
you have the lion and the eagle, who are sort of in the corners of the card.
That's true, but that's the thing, is that they're in the corners of the card. When I think of the World, I think of the naked person in the middle, surrounded by a wreath, and
Yes.
there's also an ox and I think another person in the corner, depending on which. I mean, this is like the classic Rider-Waite.
The oxen bit may be why he's always carrying around a cow. Also, the card for strength is a woman either forcing open or holding closed a lion's jaws, so Marceline might be associated with that.
But and it's also true that he is like an incredibly overdetermined metaphor, sort of on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That he in sort of his role as the king of the vampires, he takes everything on. But he's mostly about being like predatory dude energy.
He absolutely has predatory dude energy.
Like every single act of violence that he commits in the show is sexually coded.
Yes, including the whole thing with the cow.
Including the whole thing with the cow, which is both hilarious and distressing.
Yes, yes, it is.
And he as Eddie King was, he does violence on his minions, and he sucks out the fool's tooth by kissing him, and and it's sort of, and like when he's de-gooed, right, he becomes this sort of gentle lion, but what the goo is a violent lamb.
Yes.
Which is sort of interesting. It's like he is this bizarre, well, maybe not bizarre. He is this mix of symbols where he is like, he expresses violence through tenderness, sort of all the way up and all the way down.
Yeah.
And he wants to stop being this person, but the way, one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing,
he claims that he wants to stop being this person.
He claims that he wants to stop being this person. But he doesn't want to stop being this person because he thinks it's wrong or because he doesn't like the effects of it. He wants to stop being this person because he recognizes the pattern that he is in, and he's so egotistical that he thinks that he should be above this kind of pattern of cycle of abuse.
Again, this is, as you said, he is full of shit.
He is full of shit.
I think to some degree he wants, he's constantly claiming, oh, well, now I only prey on animals, but the animals can talk. So it's not really an improvement. The animals can talk and say things like, I'm actually very uncomfortable by this. Please stop doing this to me.
Yes. These are still animals who are being farmed by the weird farmer people, mind you, but yes.
Yes, which is, and I keep going back and forth. I'm not sure how much the show is incoherent versus, reveling in contradictions. I think a little bit of both.
Certainly, yeah.
But I think that I don't actually think he wants to stop until he's forced to, at which point he does so because it's that or death.
Yeah, no, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think the show is aware, like, my favorite thing about that scene is that it makes him ridiculous. And
which scene? Because he's ridiculous in all the scenes.
No, I'm talking specifically about the tantrum that he throws. This point where he is like, I refuse to be controlled by.
Oh, where he rips off all of his clothes.
He rips off all of his clothes because that's sort of a masculine gesture, but it is revealed that he's wearing tidy whities underneath his suit, and also he's up among the clouds and telling the wind to crack its cheeks and doing a King Lear, but then he just sort of splashes around in a pool, in a paddling pool like a child, and throws a literal tantrum before he's brought back down to earth so Finn can punch him in the dick repeatedly. It's sort of like the feeling that I took away from this 8 years ago was that, what this story was indicting was this kind of male emotional need, which the need to sort of control and to be lionized, mm-hmm. and to be special and
also being constantly reassured that no, you're not the bad guy here.
Exactly. And I think that is definitely true to a certain extent. But
absolutely. No, I mean you see him, and this is very much the same, John Gaius model.
Yes, absolutely.
So
he is a classic Wizards versus Lesbians wizard.
Right, where, what he wants is to control everybody and trample around on boundaries and be immortal, but he wants, but he doesn't want anybody to be mad at him about it.
Right. He wants to claim via a wide variety of interesting takes that he has the moral upper hand.
Yes. Also the cow thing, come to think of it. He has a surprising amount in common with John Gaius.
Yeah, no, it again, it really struck me how smoothly in line this is with the sort of the Wizards versus Lesbians idea that we came up with.
Right. No, you can make all of the cow jokes that from Nona about and just paste them over gifs of him dancing with the cow wearing eyeliner.
Man loves his cows. He even takes the cow into the de-vampirizing machine with him at the end.
Well, which that means at least the cow also gets de-vampirized.
Yeah, and not only an affinity with cows, but he does that little, now I just eat animals just like everybody else,
Right.
He's kind of mad about vegetarianism in the same way that John Gaius is.
Right. So that, yeah. And, the whole, and another thing that's sort of that is a narrative through line here, metaphorical one is having dudes' voices inside your head.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Absorbing dudes to gain their power is, Again, something that really continues to be a theme in, this is especially in The Locked Tomb, but of course we also see it in A Memory Called Empire and in Nine Fox Gambit.
Yeah, and sort of there's the question where it's like, well, do you, what is, when you sort of take up the mantle of this kind of destructive energy from these men,
and women in the case of the vampires.
And women. Yeah, no, actually, I if we have time, I do want to talk about like the ways in which all of the vampires are very, very gendered, except the Fool.
Yes, except the Fool.
But
Now we're gonna talk about your awful extended family made of vampires.
Oh, actually, so let's do that because it is interesting. Often when it's a person inside your head, it's in the Wizards versus Lesbians microgenre. It's a dude, and in this case, so for one thing, I thought it was really interesting that the show is completely uninterested in the effects on Marceline of having all of these people's essences inside her. It's like, it seems fairly obvious from the outside that something should be going on here, but the only noticeable change to her that's not just, ooh, now I have a cool new power, is specifically the Vampire King making her a vampire. That she can otherwise absorb the essences of all these vampires who she kills, and she doesn't seem to think that this is having any impact on her.
Yeah, I mean, which is part of Marceline's character as a sort of like disaster bisexual who's sort of left most of her life unexamined. I think that's very much sort of a part of her long-term deal, and also like the archetype that she was when she started and versus what she's grown into.
That makes sense. I did find it slightly disappointing because I felt like there were so many interesting ways that could have gone, and they just sidestepped all of it.
It's true. I don't know if they would be able to find room in it, but also it's like, yeah, no, Marceline's character has always been that she has, completely unbothered and in tears, or angry, really, like complete, like cool or emotionally dysregulated. And, but yeah, you're right. They don't do anything with, like changing her personality as these various, aspects get reinstated in her head. And part of that is that she herself is not interested in looking inside at all. It's like,
right, but we're seeing her from the outside.
Yeah. She has to be really prodded into giving a moral at the end, which is very Adventure Time.
But anyway, so yeah, let's talk about the different vampires because, we've got the Fool.
We've got the Fool who's, as in Tarot, he's the one who begins the journey, and that's pretty much all that they do with him.
Well, though it's kind of great because, part of the thing with the Fool is that the Fool is sort of walking off into nowhere, possibly off a cliff.
And the Fool's powers that he can fly.
And the Fool's powers that he can fly. So I enjoyed that. He's definitely not the most interesting. And so then next we get I can't remember if next we go to the lady or next we go to the really old-fashioned guy.
We go to the Empress next.
We go to the Empress next.
Who is like a kind of all the vampires represent a particular kind of horror, and it's a particular kind of gendered horror.
Right, and she's like femme fatale, mind control.
Femme fatale, manipulator, older woman.
Who has mind control powers.
Who has mind control powers, exactly. And, she's not necessarily a super interesting character, but...
She's not. It was pretty... I mean, you could see where her thing with the Ice King was going from a mile away, and it was nonetheless very funny when it got there.
Yeah. He did not need any encouragement to enter this kind of story whatsoever.
Well, and it's just that I really enjoy stories where somebody thinks that they're doing something, incredibly manipulative, and actually the other person's just going along because it fits with whatever their own personal issues are.
Yes, which is often the case in real life also.
Right. Well, and it's, so it's sort of guy, the sort of creepy older man who's a little bit incel-y, meets the predatory older woman, and for a while they get along great.
Yeah, no, it's like this fits together super well,
Until,
her contempt for him like is perfect because he's completely oblivious to her feelings. So, yeah.
He just wants any positive attention whatsoever from basically any woman whatsoever.
So, yeah, no, they work together very well in their palace made of ice, which I think, that works very well.
And so, but it is interesting because often when there's a fight with that kind of character, particularly when it's a young woman, and Marceline, despite being, an ancient immortal, is basically also a teenage girl. And generally when you have the teenage girl fighting the predatory older, woman with magical powers, it's over it's over the teenager's young, equally young love interest. But in this case, it's not, partly because Marceline's, not particularly into dudes, but also that this is, it's over her father figure. And so it becomes, no, you can't have my crazy dad, my crazy quasi-estranged, but I still love him dad. Yeah, no,
she is the evil archetype that she's doing is stepmother, wicked stepmother.
Sort of, except again, she's not acting maternal towards Marceline.
No, although that would be very funny.
It would be hilarious. Right. And so it is, again, an interesting choice that they made her, that the sort of sexy evil femme fatale is being a wicked stepmother type, and not a like love rival.
Yes. It's a many of these sort of weird, actually many of these opportunities to tell interesting stories happen because of the way that the show like grew over time. Mm-hmm. Like the way that it was, initially conceived, it's like, Princess Bubblegum is like Finn's love interest, and like Marceline is this very cool, sexy, older girl who he can, sort of hang out with and catch feelings about, and like sort of his, gateway into darker stuff. But as the show went on and more people got their hands on it, they were like, Finn is 13 and these two women are like immortal. This doesn't make a lot of sense,
Also that they just, happened to seem to have a good dynamic.
Exactly. And it's like, so, okay, Finn can't have either of these women. They're not appropriate for him. And we've started with a bunch of stories that we don't actually think that we want to recapitulate. So where are we going to go with this? And you end up with interesting little wrinkles like this as a result. Right,
which it's the great moment where like Finn puts his hands on both of their shoulders, and first Princess Bubblegum carefully removes it, and Marceline notices that and then removes his hand from her shoulder as well. You get the impression that Marceline could just ignore him, but Princess Bubblegum is like, no.
Yes, no, Princess Bubblegum has already had to, enforce boundaries with Finn many times up until that point.
Right.
Marceline probably didn't even notice.
Exactly.
Earlier in the show, there's an episode in which Finn and Jake are trapped inside Marceline's closet. Jake is scared of all the vampire goings-on. But when Finn ventures outside, he accidentally sees Marceline naked, and he is more horrified by that than any blood and guts he could possibly have been exposed to, because the vampirism has been coded to female sexuality this whole time.
So, and then we have the Hierophant.
Then we have the Hierophant, who...
The Pope.
His... and his entire arc was also really funny.
Yes, as Jake describes him, a wet uncle. I mean, if the Empress is a stepmother, he is your racist uncle.
Yes.
And
right, and so he's dedicated to the old ways of things. And I really enjoy. He keeps knocking on doors and being like, "Can I come in?" And people keep being like, "Absolutely not! You're a vampire." At no point does it, which is again, that's a sort of fun subversion of the trope, because normally that's the thing that makes the vampire scary, right? Is he has to be invited in, but somehow inevitably you find yourself inviting him in. But absolutely nobody is inviting him in, partly because he's a vampire and partly also because he's just kind of creepy.
Yes, no, exactly. Like the world has in fact changed. That might have worked for you. In not only like the olden days and quote unquote, but in a different narrative framing, because this is like actively engaging with the sort of vampire as sexual predator and ruined women being turned, set of stories. And it's like, this isn't quite the story we're telling. So here's this guy who's trying to operate under those rules, and nobody's taking him even at all seriously anymore.
Right.
Which is not to say that he's a figure of fun, because he's still powerful enough to be frightening. And
sort
he
of.
is absolutely not hesitant. I mean, he's very violent, and he like poisons Marceline. Like
that's true.
Really...
That's true. But that's the thing. It's that he actually does more damage to Marceline than anybody except for the Vampire King. But he does. To me, he never really came off as being particularly frightening. Because he is such a wet uncle, and that by the end, the fact that he gets defeated by Jake turns himself into a house, and then they like fling him inside the house, and then are like, "You weren't invited," and he just goes poof. So
it's very funny,
right? And so, but also he's not scary to his power is shape shifting, but everybody's already shape shifting.
Yes.
Like. Jake shapeshifts all the time. So
he's certainly not nearly as scary as the moon.
Right. He's not nearly as scary. But the thing is that he doesn't seem scary, even though he actually does some of the most damage.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And in sort of, it's easy to dismiss that kind of person when you're, part of the kind of cool kid milieu that, the heroes and writers of the show are a part of.
Right.
But it turns out they're still there.
They're still there, and
they really will not hesitate to hurt you if they're given the opportunity to do so.
Right.
And moving on to the moon, this seems just like straightforward, like, witch, we're scared of women. This is the feminine principle in its violent state.
Sort of, except like she seems like that, right? She sort of hovers and she leaves these weird egg pearl things.
Yeah, moon pearls.
Moon pearls. And I was a little sad that never went anywhere either, because it was that was one of the funnier Finn and Jake bits.
Right.
And so just I was sad that there was no payoff there. But she's sort of deceptively female. Like, she seems very feminine until suddenly she becomes this sort of cockroach monster.
Yes. I mean, well, that's sort of the kind of the
monstrous
the horror
feminine
at the heart of that,
right? Well, the thing is that's kind of the monstrous feminine, but it's also kind of not, because it's also sort of fake woman. She has this really deep voice, it turns out.
Well, I mean, it's not like a masculine voice either. It's a horror movie monster voice.
Right, but it's still a really deep voice.
This is true. Yeah, no, I suppose there is something to that. Like,
she literally has a vulva on her forehead. If she's a transphobic metaphor, she's a very advanced one.
It's kind of the reality underneath that very, that very clear metaphorical construction that she starts out resembling, But yeah, no, I think there is some weird gender shit in there.
Yeah, and I mean, to some degree, I don't think that it is deliberate. Whenever you have something that seems feminine, then turns out to be monstrous and slightly masculine, you're getting into weird trans metaphorical stuff that's unfortunate. But I don't think that was intentional on their part, but I definitely got a little bit of that vibe when I was watching.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't think that you're wrong to take that away. But I thought that there was like, I think the attempt at least was to make her into like the scariest, like just the witch that you're scared of as a kid,
right?
Like the little pig thing, or in her case, pigs.
Yes.
she opens the sort of the safe locker that Marceline and Bubblegum are in by screaming pigs at the lock until it gives up and opens itself, which I thought was very good. She's very scary and also completely incomprehensible, and also like, you know, has parent vibes.
Yeah.
Or farmer vibes, or they're the same thing vibes, you know?
No, she definitely has maternal vibes in her, like, sleepy form.
Yeah.
That's, like, she lays eggs, among other things.
And we go from, like, the sort of bad mom figure to bad dad figure.
Yes.
With the Vampire King.
So we have, like, we have bratty younger brother, and then evil stepmom, and then creepy racist uncle, and then evil mom, and then evil dad. Yes,
it's almost like this is about family tree.
Right.
Yeah, no, it clearly is. And it's like, it's in this vampire stuff. It's in Marceline's textual backstory where her, you know, father, it's never entirely made clear how her mom ended up with her demon father, but her demon father does show up in
her deadbeat,
yes,
her largely deadbeat demon father, who is, a terrible dad. I've seen some of those episodes.
And Simon, her
adoptive father, who goes insane.
Yeah, goes insane due to his, personal weakness, or however you want to construe that. And I
mean, I don't think it's necessarily his personal weakness, right? Like, he tries on an artifact, which is a bad idea, but somewhat reasonable. And then it takes over his mind and goes insane. Like, that's actually a fairly good straight up metaphor for mental illness, and which is not about personal weakness. Like, I think part of the thing that allows Simon to be something of a tragic character and not just played for laughs is that, it's also the story of losing a relative to mental illness.
Yeah, no, I admit that I'm right now, I've just watched about half of the newest Adventure Time spinoff, where Simon is like a human who still can't get over his dead wife and is being a sad sack pouty boy about it. And
that would explain why I've suddenly seen like a gajillion pieces of fan art of Simon.
Yeah, and I realize that's not his fault. That
right.
This is what happens to characters over time.
But setting that aside, because that didn't exist when this miniseries was.
Correct. Yes.
And that's also unfortunate because I feel like this is actually a fairly good story about what happens when your parent has a horrible untreated mental illness, and it does not matter how much, and like you keep looking for some glimpse of maybe they're ready to get better. I'm here to help you get better as soon as you show any sign whatsoever. And they just won't.
Indeed. Yeah, it's I think that, like, speaking of even though Rebecca Sugar was on Adventure Time for one season, and it was like 4 years before this stuff was made, like, it was her ability to drill down into the potential human drama between all of the characters who are already there that gave the show its longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I think spotting that potential was like her great gift to this show. And they would not have been able to make something like this if she hadn't done that back then.
As we've established before, Rebecca Sugar's pronouns are she and they. Now let's go on to talking about Sailor Moon.
I think that there's obviously some very arresting visual images throughout this entire thing.
There's a classic Sailor Moon tribute. I am a sucker for a classic Sailor Moon tribute, so that was great.
God, yeah. No, we're talking about her sort of sequence,
her
where
magical girl transformation, where she sucks all the vampire essence back inside herself to save everybody. Yeah. No, that was great, because often, a classic Sailor Moon tribute is going for the aesthetics, but doesn't seem to like grasp the underlying messages of Sailor Moon. But this is very much about the underlying messages of Sailor Moon, which is, about self-sacrifice and friendship. It's about how, the thing that sometimes you are forced to sacrifice yourself, but the thing that saves you from the consequences of self-sacrifice is your bonds of friendship. That is like a large part of Sailor Moon.
Yes, it's like Madoka, except not as screwed up.
Right. No. Well, see, that's the thing is that Madoka goes. Sometimes you are forced to to sacrifice yourself for your friends, and which is different. In Sailor Moon's case, it's sometimes you are forced to sacrifice yourself for the world, but don't worry, your friends will pull you out of the inevitable burnout / death that results.
I wanted to mention because the new Adventure Time miniseries Fiona and Cake starts with a Sailor Moon pastiche in which Tuxedo Mask is played by Simon.
Well, that's funny. Now I'm actually gonna have to watch that episode.
It's just the first 5 minutes. You don't have to keep watching.
But anyway, no, it's just because so often Sailor Moon stuff is pastiche from people who watched a couple episodes of the dub, but did not deeply immerse themselves to an unfortunate degree in the anime. And so I actually thought that this was a very appropriate place to put a Sailor Moon tribute, and actually very much in keeping with the themes of the show and of the Sailor Moon show, which is very much about patriarchy as sexual trauma on vulnerable teenage girls. And again, the power of friendship to deal with this.
Yes, 100%. And that's actually the sort of what I was going to mention, is at the very end of that sequence where, as she's sucking the last of the sort of lamb creature into her heart, just the one little thing comes out and just gets her on the neck as it's going in. And like, her reaction to this is just like, it's a little gasp.
Right.
There's a way in which, she was expecting this to happen, but she was kind of hoping it wouldn't.
Right. But she went in sort of expecting it to happen. That's why she, that's part of why she doesn't want, she's resistant at first to go and do anything. And then, she decides to accept the consequences. But then again, it doesn't end with, and she's a vampire and this is horrible. It ends with, but don't worry, your friends have, stocked your refrigerator with the non-harmful vampire thing that you can eat. And, are going to give you some space to feel your feelings, but will, be by to check on you anytime.
Yeah, the ending sequence is kind of perfect. Like, it's really, they gave it to the, I am going to do a little bit of info dumping here.
All right.
One of the things that made Adventure Time so unique and so cool was that they gave individual storyboarder writers a lot of leeway. They worked with each, there's like an overarching plot kind of, but people got to work with each other's characters and basically just pull the show off in different directions based on what they were interested in, which is what Rebecca Sugar did in the third season. And the two major creative forces at work here are in Stakes are Jesse Moynihan, who's the guy who's really interested in all the symbolism, like the vampire king's design and sort of the tarot thing, and all of that sort of very heightened jive talking language that the characters occasionally use to each other. They only use that when he's around because he's the one who writes that,
Interesting.
Yeah. That's Jesse Moynihan. And then on the other hand, there's Steve Wolfhard and Tom Herbich, who are the team who did the last episode here. And they're the ones who are good at humans. They're the ones who are good at human feeling.
That's a useful...
Yeah. And like family stuff and regret and sadness, and not sort of in the, we're going to sing about our feelings way that Rebecca Sugar does it, which is, good, but in a slightly more sort of ironically sad kind of a way. And I'm glad that it was them who got to end this one.
Yeah.
Because Jesse is the one who gets to put it into motion, and who has a lot of thoughts about masculinity and gender and identity and guilt and power. But it ends on a human scale, which I think was the right choice.
Yeah, no, and I definitely think that was the right choice. And that I thought the ending was in general really well handled because it didn't make there was still some like real sadness there that she's trying to put a good spin on it of, oh, well, at least I got to grow up a little bit. But, there's still some sadness there, and that's appropriate.
It is indeed. I think that one other thing that I want to flag up is that I guess as befits the Wizards versus Lesbians microgenre, is that all of the dudes in here just fuck up continuously to a far greater extent than they do in the rest of Adventure Time. Like Finn is like so much less effective during this series than he generally is.
I mean, they still get their occasional moments, but
they do, but they're very like, I think they feel relegated to bumbling sidekicks here in a way that seems extremely intentional and probably necessary since, they're the heroes of the show otherwise. Yeah, it's sort of really interesting, the way that like these teenage energies interact with what is sort of a very adult problem to be having. And like that, I just love that Finn's response to the avatar of toxic masculinity is to punch him in the dick repeatedly.
And this is somewhat ineffectual in the end, though.
No, it doesn't work. But
like,
it's still...
that was also what I enjoyed.
It's a very straightforward, but it's not going to solve this problem.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, do you have any final thoughts to share?
No, I feel like I've shared both the things that I liked and the things that I thought didn't work as well.
Yeah.
But overall, I definitely enjoyed it.
I'm glad. I think it's really good. I think that like there are some episodes of this 8 series that are better than others. Some are more visually interesting than others. And that's part and parcel of the Adventure Time thing. If I'm trying to sell Adventure Time to somebody, I'd be like, it's that freedom and the degree of different sort of approaches to character designs and stuff that leads it to some really high highs and also to a lot of really boring stuff.
Yeah, so I feel like actually the trick to experiencing Adventure Time for somebody like me is to do what, in fact, my friends did to get me to watch Leverage, which is provide me with a list of, here are the episodes that you will enjoy. Just watch those, yes. and then you can either stop or you'll be sufficiently committed to watch that you can watch the rest.
And if anybody out there would like me to do that for them, I think that I can still do that.
I might ask for that at some point. A
special interest run with this. I still remember all the stuff, but I don't know if there's anything that you haven't seen yet that you're gonna like better than the stuff that I've already made you watch.
I guess you've already made me watch all the ones that I'm going to like because they're all the ones with Marceline and Bubblegum.
Yeah, pretty much.
Maybe I'll just watch the last episode where apparently they kiss.
Yeah, it's very busy, but they do kiss in it.
And the first 5 minutes of the new series, just so that I can see the Sailor Moon pastiche. Speaking of people's cartoon special interests.
Yeah, no, it's certainly worth a brief look at the very least.
These are not episode recommendations for Alexis because they involve a lot of shouting. But if the rest of you are interested, the sort of classic one person created the character and the other person brought them in directions that they weren't intended to be brought into dichotomy in Adventure Time is the Earl of Lemongrab. And if you like an interesting look into different ways of handling an autistic character and autistic parents, speaking of which, start with Jesse's episodes, Too Young and You Made Me, and then move on to Tom's episodes, All Your Fault, Too Old, and Lemon Ho Parts 1 and 2. And then for Jesse's reply, check out The Mountain, which is probably my favorite Adventure Time episode.
All right, well, are you going to do Adventure Timey style jingles, which I will note is another way in which this is sort of foreshadowed the Wizards versus Lesbians microgenre and ensuing spin-off podcast?
Oh, man. I can even tell like who wrote which songs.
I'm not surprised.
Because like a bunch of them are also songwriters. And
well, I highly encourage you to do Adventure Time style ukulele jingles for this episode.
I do not own a ukulele, but I may finally do electric bass based jingles because it's Marceline.
That's fair. All right. Anyway, thank you, everyone. What are we doing next time? We recorded them all out of episodes.
I keep my exoskeletons to myself.
Oh boy, well that's a real change of pace, isn't it? We recorded that one a while ago.
Yes.
Well, that'll be a interesting change of pace, and will make you. No. That's it. Now that's a book that will make you wish that you were watching shouty cartoons instead.
Yeah. No. Stay tuned for that one, and. Because we didn't know it at the time, but there appears to be an entire genre of SF books by mothers of autistic children about how hard it is. And that's entry number 2 in our canon.
Stay tuned, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.